And that's a great question. I think what you're seeing now is more of a push on enterprise shared solutions. So we're looking at timekeeping as an enterprise solution for the state. We're looking at the Ohio Business Gateway, which we're trying to make that into more of a business one-stop. And I think there's a lot of traction around that with the Lieutenant Governor really driving that whole equation. So I think those two things, I think also as we look at document management, I mean, you can imagine I have 26 different agencies with really no direct authority over them, and we all have different document management systems we're trying to put in an enterprise platform basically to use. So I think you'll see more of those strategic sort of enterprise shared solutions as we go forward. And of course that's piggybacking on top of like integrated eligibility, Ohio benefits, and a lot of other downstream impacts like identity management access and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of good things going on in Ohio. And this is going to be kind of crazy because I think that one of the largest accomplishments we made was with a group of CFOs, chief financial officers, who sat down and really looked at the account codes along with the Office of Budget and Management and really streamlined how we can go about defining the IT costs for the state of Ohio. So that has really allowed us to be able to track and look at metrics and measurements on how we're doing from a state perspective in terms of the IT spend. And so when you talk about that, what does that really mean? That allows me to be able to see that in 2010, in the previous administration, we were spending about 19% invested in our application space and about 81% invested in IT operations and infrastructure, which makes sense because it's 26 different agencies. They all had their own IT. They were all managing their own infrastructure. Well, in FY15, we're tracking those numbers right now, and 50% of that investment is going to applications, and 50% is going to the IT operations and infrastructure. So we're seeing a downward curve on the infrastructure space and IT operations, where ideally we should be is 70% in the applications, because that's really what matters to the citizens in the business. So I would say that is it's kind of one of those back behind the cloud or behind the curtain things that have been very beneficial, I think, from a state perspective. I also think, we've done an excellent job of migrating the state agencies with their assistance, with multi-agency assistance, into our State of Ohio Computing Center. I think probably in the last year, just in the last 12 months, we've brought in about 3,700 environments into our data center. So that's those guys are moving, and they're moving quick, and there's a lot more to do, but I'd say that those two things kind of pop out for me. Well, I think there's always, as you well know, we just put out the NASCIO IT workforce study. I think we're all wrestling with similar issues in all the states and territories. And it's interesting for us to see, offices of talent management and how people are looking at the civil service code and all those kind of things. So that was one thing. I think that the other thing that I'm trying to get out of this year's mid-year is getting a better handle around what other states are doing in that security space and how they're working the governance process, because I think as we go forward with the Fusion Center and public safety, emergency management agencies, and of course the security that comes under the authority of the state CIO, we need to make sure that we're communicating out quickly, pushing that information to local government, which is kind of new, and pushing that information out to local law enforcement through the Fusion Center. So defining what our roles and responsibilities through there will be a collective effort. And of course, the National Guard is a big player in those discussions as well, especially as we begin to look at threats across the state and man-made or natural events. Of course, they're major players in all of those, and will continue to be. The biggest challenge we're facing in Ohio is consistency in our security posture, because we've had 26 different agencies sort of managing security. They haven't necessarily been consistent in how that's deployed from agency to agency. So one of the key things that we did was we centralized the security staff. So they come into the center and they're trained, and they know the process and procedures, they know each other, and then they're reassigned back out to the agencies. And we're doing that as CISOs retire or take a new job, attrit to another position, and it seems to be working extremely well, because when you come into a stressful situation when there's an event happening, it's good to know the face, it's good to know the skill set, and it's good to know the process so you can plug those guys in. And instead of one guy and 2 pair of hands, now all of a sudden you got 3 and you got 6 extra hands. So. Well, I'll start with the end of that question and I'll move backwards. We do have a CIO boot camp, and we had 5 in on Saturday, and a 6th one joined us on Sunday. And it's just to kind of get everybody acclimated to all the things that we touch. I think people sometimes forget that our roles as state CIOs touch so many different things that we don't think about from an outside looking in. I mean, what's our role in procurement? What's our role with security? I mean, a lot of times people don't understand that. And just having lessons learned and CIOs that have been at their states for longer than two years are in that room sort of answering questions and also sort of giving lessons learned, what we would do differently if we had our process to start over again, what we would target, making sure that you have leaders instead of spokesmen. You want to make sure you're leading. And it was really kind of interesting because this new group of CIOs, these guys are pretty savvy. I mean, there's some of them coming from the private sector and not understanding the public sector, but are cognizant, and I mean, they ask great questions. They're on top of it. So we got a good cream of the crop coming in. It'll be real good. The conference really, for most people, kind of kicked off this morning, but we actually had a state members day where it's sort of a in the lodge discussion among the state members, and that was pretty much all yesterday afternoon, and then the welcoming reception, of course. And then today went off great. Great keynote speaker. Michelle Stacy did a great job. We had the IT workforce panel, and that's, like I said, I mean, I don't think people understand all the cool things that are happening in all the states, because everybody is a different journey, but, to listen to the things that Carlos in California has, and Tim Robine in Missouri, and some of the guys that you don't hear from a lot, like Tim, and Mark Bengel's got a great program. I mean, there's just so much that we can learn from each other. So you come back to the original question. A lot of what I do when I come to here, to the NASCIO conference, is get with those other states, plagiarize like hell, if I can say that, the programs and the approaches. Now I modify it for Ohio because I know what works in Ohio. But I mean, they're great ideas, and we just leverage each other. I mean, that's the best part of NASCIO. Well, every time we come into the DC area here in Alexandria, of course, but we always have a fly-in, and so we have a big room, and the state members get an opportunity to talk to and listen to and have interaction between some of the federal programs that are out there. There are some places we could do a lot better collaboration, but I think for the most part, there are things that they can take from us and our experience, our perspective in particular. But also we understand that you can't have a national program and have 50 different approaches to that as well as anything else. But we do know what works in our states, and it's good to have that communication because you can formulate your approach and your program around the generalities that we can find common interest in.